All right, ladies and gentlemen. So today before we talked about why should we study art? Why should we look at it closely, trying to develop an understanding? Today we're going to talk about what art actually is, because there's an awful lot of things where people will say it's art. Maybe it's not so much, but a lot of that is up for you to decide. Um, so we're going to talk about what art is, and to do that, to start with that, we have to come up with a definition. Now, art is the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form like painting and sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or is important there, or emotional power. That is a lot to write. And if you look in your notes, you have several blank spots that probably need to be filled in by the words that are bolded. It's almost like I do that on purpose. For the record, I do. So let's break this down a little bit. The expression or application of human creative skill and imagination. Now, that's a lot of important words there. Expression or application means that you made something. You made something using your creativity and imagination. So art starts with making something using creativity and imagination, typically in a visual form. I kind of disagree with that part because art can also be literary, it can be musical, it can be theatrical. In this class, we are 100% focusing on the visual form. It's a visual art class. That's how it works. But you make something creative and imaginative that is appreciated. That means other people like it because of either their beauty or the emotional power. Now, it can 100% be both. You can create a work of art that does both, but it doesn't have to do both. It doesn't have to be pretty, and it doesn't have to make you emotional. All right. So that's what art is. So what is an artist? Well, this is really easy. An artist is a person who creates an artwork using creativity and skill. Now, guys, creativity and skill. Another piece needs to be in there, intention. You need to do it on purpose. If you're carrying a can of paint, you trip over a sidewalk, you spill that can of paint everywhere, and it just happens to be pretty. Did you make art? No, you made a mess. Okay. It could be a pretty mess, but it's still a mess. Intention is important. If you do not have the intent to create something, it's not art. All right. But who can be an artist? You have creativity, you have skill, you have intention. Who can be an artist? Everybody. Everybody can be an artist. So, creativity. You guys have heard that word your whole life, probably haven't sat down to try to understand what it means. The use of imagination or original ideas, especially when it comes to the production of a creative, imaginative, artistic work. So creativity means you come up with something new. Now, that does not mean that it's exclusively new. It does not mean it's not inspired by something. For example, we talked about the two Napoleons. We saw Jacques Louis David's Napoleon crossing the Alps, and we saw Kehinde Wiley's. Was Kehinde Wiley's less creative because he used the original painting? No, but he took that imagery on purpose in order to create a different point. And then he changed it according to what he needed in order to convey a different sort of meaning. Okay, so creativity does not mean that you're not relying on other sources, but it does mean that you didn't copy it exactly. All right, so aesthetics. Aesthetics we'll talk about in more detail at a later time, but it is the philosophy of art. Now, philosophy is it's kind of like a brain game. It is the study of the nature of thinking. So when we talk about the philosophy of art, we're talking about the nature of what beauty is. The thing with philosophy is technically there's no right or wrong answer. It is not fact based. That means it does have an influence from opinions, but it's about thinking about. So if I'm asking you to identify something, in this case, an aesthetics question, which one of those questions are aesthetics, they're not going to be based on facts. Okay, it's going to be about thinking what it means. So the nature of beauty, what makes something beautiful? Why is it pretty? Why do some people agree on some things being beautiful and not on others? Okay, so which of the following questions are aesthetics questions? We have what is art? We have why is this art? We have which elements of art did the artist use? We have who made this artwork? And we have what makes an artwork beautiful. So once again, aesthetics are not based on fact. So I'm going to give you guys a second. I'm going to pause the recording. And I want you guys to tell me which of these three, because 3 of them are aesthetics based. Which of these 3 questions are aesthetics? We're going to pause dramatically. And then we're going to move on. So as a group, y'all should have come up with what is art? Because while we do have a definition, does that mean that everything fits that definition? Why is this art? What determines whether or not something is art or not? What makes an artwork beautiful? We don't necessarily agree on all of these answers. That's what makes it not fact-based. Which elements of art did the artist use? That is a fact-based question, I can tell you. And it would be a right or wrong answer. Who made the artwork? Look it up. Unless historically we simply do not know the name of the artist, we know that a person was behind it. That is a fact-based. At least we hope it's the person behind it, seeing as how AI are. That's a different discussion for a different time. What is art? In general terms, art uses the elements of art and the principles of design. Our next unit will actually be focused on these 2 concepts. So the elements of art are the parts and pieces that you use to create artwork. It's kind of like if you bake and you use these solid ingredients, you mix the ingredients together and you're making something. So, milk, sugar, eggs, flour, throw that all together, mix it up, throw it in the oven. Are you always going to get a cake though? No, sometimes you're going to get a food brick. Okay, so the elements are those parts and pieces. They are the raw ingredients. Just because you throw them together does not mean you've made an artwork. Sometimes you just make a mess. Don't do it in your parents' kitchen. They won't appreciate it. All right, so the elements of art are going to be line, shape, form, color, value, texture, and space. We will be talking about those 7 concepts at a later time. The principles of design are like the recipe. So the elements of art are all of the ingredients that you need, and the principles of design tell you how to apply those ingredients in order to make an actual cake. Because there's tons of different ways to make cakes though. So there's lots of different recipes. And the thing about art is once you understand the rules, we break them. That's how you break the mold. All right, so the principles of design are the recipe pieces, how you use the elements to create something cool. Those, emphasis, balance, repetition and rhythm, proportion, scale, movement, unity and harmony, and variety. Now, the culture for artists kind of disagree sometimes on exactly how many principles of design there are. Some of these concepts are similar, but not exactly the same. Repetition and rhythm are related, but not necessarily the same idea. But I lump them together because reasons. All right, so composition. Composition is how an artwork is put together using the elements of art and the principles of design. So what that means is how do you use all of your ingredients and follow that recipe to create yourself an artwork? Okay, so composition is how you use both of them. Elements of art are the ingredients, principles of design are the recipe. The composition is the final cake that you make at an end. It's up to everyone else whether or not they enjoy it. All right, now, at this point, we're going to discuss whether or not some of these are art. I might pause a couple of times dramatically to see what your opinion is, but we're going to talk here. This is the Mona Lisa, painted in 1503 by Leonardo da Vinci. How many of you in here, show of hands, not voices, how many of you in here think this is art? Be ready to explain why. And we're going to move on to the next one. This right here, look at Jacques-Louis David again. This is the death of Marat. This was painted in 1793. Yes, that is a dead body in a bathtub. He's not actually in a bathtub, but it kind of works. Cringy. Is it art? Be ready to tell me why or why not. Now, this one's always fun to me because I put this up here and I ask you guys if you think it's art. Let's talk about it. Is that art? That looks like a giant Campbell's soup can. Let's talk. Oh my goodness, guess what? It's the same horse. It's the horse we saw yesterday. It's the horse we saw previously in the last presentation, Napoleon crossing the Alps, but it looks different. Why does it look different? What do you see about this horse that does not look the same as the 2 horses that we saw previously? Why do you think Banksy, world-renowned graffiti artist for the record, why do you think Banksy chose to take this horse and do this to it? We're going to talk about that too. Sometimes things get called art. but maybe you don't necessarily agree. Is it art? Really? So this is a piece, this is all about the treachery of images. This is by Rene Magritte. He was a surrealist artist. This is a giant pipe, or at least it's a picture of a pipe. In fact, the words below it in French, ceci n'est pas une pipe, literally translate to, this is not a pipe. Why do you think Rene Magritte painted a pipe on canvas and then told you that it wasn't? I am not going to make you read this. I'm going to explain what this is. So this is Keith Arnott. This is Trouser. I'm not going to talk about why he named it that. But this is a photo of himself holding a sign, I'm a real artist. Now, what the word piece over to the left of that basically says is that by adding the word real to something, we actually start to call it into question. So if I were to walk up to you in full creepy mode, we'll put this in full creepy mode. If I were to walk up to you, you didn't know who I was in a park, and I said, I'm a real police officer, you need to come with me. Most of y'all better have a whole ton of red flags saying no. It sounds suspicious. Sorry, I had to pause for a moment. Maybe I can cut that out later, but I doubt it. So anyways, adding the word real to something makes us doubt it. If I walked up to you and said, I'm a real police officer, you should be doubting it. It doesn't sound real. So what's going on here is Keith Arnott was a photographer. And in the early days of artistic photography, a lot of people were like, oh, it's not really art. You're just pointing a camera at something and taking a picture. So that's not really art. So here's this dude setting up shots, composing shots, and doing all of this hard work to make sure that his shots communicate an idea and are composed in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. And everyone's telling him that, oh, that's nothing. That doesn't require any sort of skill or thought, so it's not art. Let me ask you guys a question. Have y'all ever taken a picture that was really, really, really good and you love how it looked, and then you also took a picture that was really, really, really bad and you know it looked terrible? If you can make a distinction between a good photograph and a bad photograph, you understand that there are ways to create good photographs using skill. So here's this man who's been shooting all this photography, and everyone is telling us it's not really an art. And he's having to justify himself. No, really, I'm an artist. No, it took me skill to make these pictures. I'm a real artist. And he had to tell everybody so much that word real that he doubted it. And he went through a really dark period where he no longer believed in himself because he had to completely justify himself to others. This piece was how he broke out of it, realizing that having to put that word real on there made him actually doubt whether or not he was, and that it tore up his self-esteem. This was how he coped. Okay, so moving on. Some of y'all should know what this is. I promise you, it is not a fountain. In fact, if you see something like this, please, for the love of all things, do not drink from it. This is Fountain by Marcel Duchamp, 1917. This thing is still on display in a major museum. We're going to pause and talk about it. The Innocent Eye Test. This is the Innocent Eye Test, painted in 1981 by Mark Tansey. And it comes to be a little bit of a thought process. There are some people in this image that are apparently conducting a study. Y'all see those white lab jackets? All the little clipboards and all this stuff. And they're looking at this cow, looking at a painting, and they're trying to figure out something. What do you think they're testing, and why? And why is it kind of ironic? Talk about that too. Now, I'm not going to make you read this. I'm going to tell you the story. This is an image by Robert Rauschenberg, erased de Kooning drawing done in 1953. So when this was created, Robert Rauschenberg was a young and upcoming artist. He was starting to get his name out there, but he wasn't really famous, didn't make a whole lot of money, wasn't really established yet. Okay, so Rauschenberg, this young guy, walks up to Willem de Kooning. Now, de Kooning was an established artist. He had a lot of backers. He had people paying him money. He was famous. Okay, and he was an older dude. So Rauschenberg walked up to de Kooning and said, hey, would you like to participate in this really interesting art project with me? And de Kooning's like, you know what? That sounds like fun. Let's do it. And de Kooning made this really intricate drawing with heavy crayon, which is oil-based, grease pencil, ink, and graphite. Now, graphite is your regular pencil. The rest of those are really oily, sort of permanent media. Old guy gives this drawing to young guy. De Kooning gives this to Rauschenberg, and Rauschenberg spends a month erasing it completely and eliminating the original drawing. Then he put a gold frame on it, called it Erased de Kooning Drawing, and put it on display. So not only did he eliminate the original artwork, but he actually exhibited as if it were his own. Did de Kooning create, or did Rauschenberg create an artwork here by erasing somebody else's work? Let's talk. All right, so we're not going to do the group part of this, so I'm just going to kind of move on. But the write 5 sentences part is important. On page 7 of your composition notebook, you should have 2 of these 4 images we're about to discuss that you will need to tell me whether or not you think it is or is not art based on definitions. Okay, I want you to use the definitions that we had previously in order to define it. This is a painting by Congo. Zoologist Desmond Morris in London gave Congo the chimpanzee a whole bunch of paints and canvases, and Congo proceeded to make over 400 paintings with those materials. Now, public reactions are mixed. I mean, some people liked it, some people didn't, whatever. But Pablo Picasso owned a picture by Congo and hung it in his studio. In 2005, 3 of Congo's paintings were sold in an auction for over $26,000. At that same auction, pieces by Andy Warhol, an established famous artist, and Renoir, an older established famous artist, did not sell at all. Do you think Congo the chimpanzee created art? Using the definitions that we discussed in class, tell me why or why not. You are not being graded on your opinion. You will be graded on how well you justify it. This is Call It Driftwood. We're going to imagine that you are in charge of a museum. You are a curator. You are in charge of getting artwork into the museum by getting artwork that people are interested in. That's how they sell tickets to go into the museum. So you are in charge of bringing money into that museum by getting artwork. Walking along, let's just say it's down at Lake Weir. You're walking along and you happen to see this famous artist. You're like, oh my gosh, the famous artist is on vacation. You buck up the courage, you walk up to this famous artist, you're like, oh my gosh, I am such a fan of your work. I manage a small museum here in our area, and I'm in charge of getting the artwork. I would love it if I could get pieces of your artwork to be on display in my museum. But we don't have a really big budget. So is there any way you can help me? The artist looks at you, grins a little bit, bends down, picks up a piece of driftwood, hands it to you, and says, call it driftwood. Is that piece of wood that he picked up off that ground and handed to you, is that artwork? Why or why not? Once again, I want 5 sentences. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want 5 sentences written on page 7, if you happen to have this particular piece, explaining why you think it is or is not art, using justification. Do not just write, it is not art. Give me a reason. This piece, in 1964, Parisian performance artist Ben Vautier sat down in the middle of a street in Nice with a sign on his lap. It read, this is the translation, look at me, that's all it takes. I'm art. Regardez, look at me. Moi cela suffit, this is sufficient, this is enough. Je suis art. I am art. And then he had a famous photographer take a picture of him sitting in the street. Now, this comes with an extra part of the question. Do you think this is art? Why or why not? And then we get to the next part. If you think it is art, who's the artist? Ben Vautier, who had the idea and sat in the middle of the street, or the photographer that framed and composed the photo? You need to come up with those definitions, please. You need to explain it properly. And the last puzzle is pile of bricks. So in 1966, Carl Andre, which was a well-known minimalist sculptor, so that means very little work done to the original pieces, bought 120 pre-made bricks and arranged them in a grid on the floor. All right. He placed them 2 bricks high, 6 across, and 10 long. And this has been on display at a major museum. Now imagine down the street, you got a contractor who's tiling a bathroom. He has bought the exact same pre-made tiles, arranged them because he's a neat freak. I understand that feel. Arranged them in that exact same pattern. If Carl Andre is an artist for just arranging pre-made bricks on the floor, does that mean that this contractor is an artist for doing the exact same thing? Why or why not? And for that matter, is buying 120 bricks and just happening to line them up neatly, is that art? Why or why not? That's it for today, y'all. We'll talk later.